If you've been carrying something that no structure was ever built to hold, this is for you. Not the lecture hall at the University of Edinburgh, not the 17 years of research pressed into my hands in that quiet room, not the moment I realized what I'd built had become a ceiling instead of a container. Those are my details. What matters right now is what you're carrying tonight and whether you know what it's actually costing you. You've been doing what you've always done, holding, watching, tracking the shift underneath the surface of things while everyone around you responds only to what they can see. The weight doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up anywhere other people can read. It accumulates in the body, in the posture, in the breath. That particular shallow, efficient breath you've learned to take without thinking, conserving space, conserving energy, without acknowledgement, without a single person who understands what it costs to be the one who holds the baseline while everything rearranges around it. And tonight, God is not asking you to hold anything. That's the message. The only thing He wants you to hear. I know how that lands on someone who has spent years as the load bearer, the uncredited one, the person who feels the pressure change and quietly adjusts before anyone else notices the weather. Not holding feels like dropping something that will shatter. It feels irresponsible. It feels like the opposite of what you were made for, but this isn't permission to be careless. This is just how the architecture actually works. Do you remember the last time you exhaled completely? Pause. Not the breath you release when you finally sit down. Not the sigh between tasks when the next one is already forming. The kind of exhale that empties everything. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper than the diaphragm. Somewhere that's been clenched so long you forgot it was clenched at all. Most people carrying what you carry can't remember the last time they breathed like that. Because breathing like that requires a level of letting go that every part of you has been trained to resist. You've been conditioned by circumstance, by necessity, by the quiet inheritance of generations before you to treat vigilance as safety, to treat the unclenching of your hands as a risk you can't afford. And that conditioning didn't begin with you. What you carry at a structural level, the sensitivity, the restlessness, the way you read a room before anyone speaks, it didn't start with you. It arrived with you. But it was already in the room. It's an inheritance. A way of perceiving passed down through your bloodline, trained across generations to expect scarcity, brace for loss, and treat peace as a warning sign rather than a destination. That inheritance served a purpose. In the generations before you, it kept people alive. It kept them alert, attuned to threat, prepared for the collapse that always seemed to arrive just when things looked stable. Your nervous system received that programming. It didn't ask your permission. It simply came online. But tonight, God is issuing a different command. Tonight, He's telling you to stand down, not because the assignment is over, because the battle you've been fighting in your mind, the surveillance of every possible outcome, the endless replay of conversations and calculations and contingency plans was never yours to fight. It's a battle that was already fought on your behalf by a force that doesn't need your anxiety to function. You've been trying to secure outcomes that were never yours to secure. Mapping timelines that were never yours to map. Carrying weight that belongs to a sovereignty higher than your own, as if the creator of the universe needed your constant mental engagement to keep the provisions moving. He doesn't. Pause. That's not a soft reassurance. That's just true. The same God who knew you before the foundation of the world doesn't need your help to finish what He started. Your anxiety doesn't accelerate His timeline. Your overthinking doesn't improve His strategy. Your exhaustion isn't a contribution, it's evidence that you've been trying to do His job and yours at the same time. No human frame was built to carry that. I know what this feels like from the inside. Lying awake at 3 in the morning, running calculations on problems that won't be solved by human reasoning, carrying a pressure in the chest that looks like overthinking from the outside but feels, from the inside, like the weight of receiving something too large for the container. treating peace as a warning because in your history, peace was always the moment before something broke. That inability to fully rest. That sense that if you let your guard down, something will slip through. So here's the question underneath all of it: what if what you've been guarding against isn't a collapse, but a completion? What if the tension you've been holding isn't preventing disaster? What if it's been delaying arrival? Here's what most people carrying this never learn until they've burned through every reserve. When you stop mentally gripping the timeline, you release the resistance in your field. The unclenching of your hands, the surrender of analytical control. It's not just a spiritual posture. It's how the thing actually moves. It's the mechanism by which the people, the resources, the next chapter can finally align. They couldn't enter while you were still fighting to control the door. Think of it this way: you've been standing at a threshold, pushing against a door that opens inward. The harder you push, the more firmly it seals. Not because it's locked, because the mechanism requires you to stop pushing before it can swing open. Your surrender isn't giving up. Your surrender is the key. Now, I know some of you watching this are thinking it's just content, dressed in scripture and structural language to sound deeper than it is. I've thought exactly that about videos like this one. So I'm not going to ask you to believe what I'm saying. I'm going to ask you to watch what it produces in someone who does. The proof isn't in the theology, it's in the life. Here is what most chosen ones never figure out, not until they've burned through everything they had left. When you stop mentally wrestling with how your timeline is supposed to resolve, something shifts. The resistance drops. The unclenching of your hands, the actual physical letting go of control, isn't just a spiritual posture. It's how things move. It's the mechanism by which the right people, the right resources, the right doors can finally find their way to you. They couldn't get through while you were still fighting to hold the handle. Think of it this way: you've been standing at a threshold, pushing against a door that opens inward. The harder you push, the more firmly it stays shut. Not because it's locked, because the mechanism requires you to stop pushing before it can swing open. Your surrender isn't giving up. Your surrender is the key. Now, I know some of you watching this are thinking it's just content, dressed up in scripture and structural vocabulary to sound deeper than it is. I've thought exactly that about videos like this one. So I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm going to ask you to watch what it produces in someone who does. The proof isn't in the theology, it's in the life. And there's something I haven't said yet, something specific about why the breakthrough tends to arrive the precise moment you stop trying to force it. That's not a rhetorical question, there's a real answer. But without what's still being built here, it would sound like every other spiritual line you've already heard and quietly set aside. The fatigue you're carrying right now isn't defeat. It's not evidence that you've failed or fallen behind. It's the natural cool down of a soul that has just anchored something enormous. Your body is integrating the shift. The work has been done at a level you can't see yet. Pause. That's the one thing worth holding tonight. The battle is already won. Your assignment is to rest. But that raises the question you've been circling since this started. If the battle is won, why does it still feel like losing? If the provision is secured, why does the math still not add up? There's something underneath the spiritual language that hasn't been named yet, and what's actually happening right now while you stand there exhausted, convinced you're losing ground, is the only thing that can answer it. That gap between knowing you're called and actually moving on that calling. It eats at you. You feel it as a pressure in your chest that sleep doesn't touch. You carry your own version of that draw, your own unspoken opening words. Your own borrowed equipment sitting unused while you wait for a permission that's never going to come. The theology of being chosen isn't the problem. Most of you already believe it. You've felt it since childhood. The problem is what you've built on top of the knowing, and whether that structure can actually hold the weight it was designed to carry. Let me show you what I mean, starting with the word most spiritual content treats as decoration. Chosen. In English it sounds like a status. It lands like a compliment. Like being picked first, but the Hebrew beneath it, bakal, doesn't mean preferred. It means selected for a function. A tool isn't preferred. A tool is selected because the task demands its specific shape, and the hand that holds it knows exactly what that tool can do that no other tool can. That's not favoritism, that's specification, and the reason this matters is that most chosen ones have been operating from a model of chosenness that has nothing to do with function and everything to do with identity. You've been wearing chosen like a coat. It's become something you are. And when chosen is only an identity, it feeds you nothing. It demands nothing except a private feeling of being different. That feeling has been doing the work that function was always supposed to do, and function, unlike feeling, has a cost. The truth is harder than the feeling. Being chosen means you were selected before the foundation of the world, not for recognition, not for comfort, but for a function most people are never asked to perform. Jeremiah 1:5 isn't just a verse you've heard. It's a structural description of what was happening before your first breath. The word new in that verse, yada, isn't intellectual awareness. It's not God scanning the future and spotting a useful prophet. Yada is intimate knowing. The knowing of a husband toward a wife. The kind of knowing that produces life. God didn't look ahead and find Jeremiah. God knew Jeremiah in the deepest Hebrew sense of that word, before Jeremiah existed as a thought in his mother's mind. Because God knew him, God separated him. Because God separated him, God appointed him. The appointment is downstream from the choosing. The function is downstream from the knowing. You weren't selected for what you would do. You were selected for what you are, and what you are came before anything you would do. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. If being chosen is about what you are and not what you do, then everything you've been doing to prove you're chosen has been wasted energy. The striving, the overthinking, the constant mental surveillance of your own timeline. Identity without function doesn't rest, it performs. And performance is a slow drain on equipment that was built for output, not exhibition. You can't exhibit your way into the appointment that the knowing already produced. You can only carry it. I sat in that Portobello kitchen and stopped the recorder after 90 seconds because I was still trying to earn the right to speak. I'd convinced myself that without formal grounding, without recognized credentials in a therapeutic modality, putting the work out publicly could expose people to something I couldn't yet prove was safe. That was the excuse. It was a good one, so good it took over a year to see that it wasn't protecting anyone. It was protecting me. It was shielding me from the actual cost of being chosen. You speak before you're certified, you move before you're ready, and the authority you carry isn't granted by any human institution, which means it can't be revoked by one. Jeremiah 1:5 isn't a verse you've simply heard. It's a description of what was already happening before your first breath. The word new in that verse, *yada**, isn't intellectual awareness. It's not God scanning the timeline and spotting a future prophet. *yada** is intimate knowing. The knowing of a husband toward a wife. The knowing that produces life. God didn't look ahead and find Jeremiah. God knew Jeremiah in the Hebrew sense before Jeremiah existed as a thought in his mother's mind. Because God knew him, God separated him. Because God separated him, God appointed him. The appointment flows from the choosing. The function flows from the knowing. You weren't selected for what you would do. You were selected for what you **, and what you are came before anything you would ever do. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. If being chosen is about what you are and not what you do, then everything you've been doing to prove you're chosen, that's been wasted energy. The striving. The overthinking. The constant surveillance of your own timeline. Identity without function doesn't rest. It performs, and performance is a slow drain on something that was built for output, not exhibition. You can't perform your way into an appointment the knowing already secured. You can only carry it. I sat in that Portobello kitchen and stopped the recorder after 90 seconds because I was still trying to earn the right to speak. I'd convinced myself that without peer-reviewed grounding, without formal credentialing in a recognized therapeutic modality, releasing the work publicly would expose people to something I couldn't yet prove was safe. That was the excuse. It was a good one, so good it took over a year to see it wasn't protecting anyone. It was protecting me, shielding me from the actual cost of being chosen. You speak before you're certified, you move before you're ready, and the authority you carry isn't granted by any human institution, which means it can't be revoked by one either. What happened during the year that many discs sat in the drawer beside my father's letters? Nothing visible. On the outside, I was still Elias, former academic, occasionally attending lectures, still functional, but something was eroding underneath. Not my faith, not my calling, my capacity to keep living one step removed from the thing I was built to do. There's a specific exhaustion that comes to people who know what they're supposed to be doing and aren't doing it. It doesn't respond to sleep. It doesn't lift on weekends. Research on burnout separates fatigue from overwork from a deeper erosion tied to chronic role misalignment, the bridge being used as a storage shed. A 2023 meta-analysis in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that people who feel a persistent gap between their calling and their daily activity show a 37% higher incidence of emotional exhaustion, even after controlling for hours worked. That's not about workload. It's about mismatch. The bridge is still a bridge. The engineering is intact. But the weight it was designed to bear isn't moving across it, and the bridge deteriorates. Not from overuse. From underuse. From the wrong kind of weight pressing down. That might be you. If you're exhausted in a way sleep doesn't touch, that fatigue isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence you've been carrying the wrong kind of weight. The weight of earning what was already given. The weight of trying to control what was never yours to manage. The weight of vigilance, that generational inheritance of scanning the horizon for threats, bracing for loss, treating peace like a warning sign. That weight was never meant for your structure. It was handed to you by a parent who learned it from their parent, by a system that trained you to treat safety as something you had to produce yourself. The inheritance is real. And it's the thing most chosen ones spend their entire lives mistaking for their personality. You carry a sensitivity that didn't originate with you. Trace it back. A grandmother who knew someone was lying before they opened their mouth. A grandfather who felt a storm coming hours before the sky changed. A parent who read rooms like text and never told anyone what they were reading. This isn't metaphor, this is transmission. The reason you felt different your entire life, not special, not better, just different slightly off, watching your own life from a step behind, is that you inherited a nervous system calibrated to frequencies most people don't register. For generations, that inheritance was treated as a liability. Your grandmother was told she was too sensitive. Your grandfather was told he was imagining things. Your parent learned to suppress what they perceived because expressing it cost too much. And now you're carrying the accumulated weight of 3 generations of suppression, a sensitivity that was never named for what it is, and so was never used for what it was built to do. That's the inheritance, not the pain. Not the trauma, the sensitivity itself, the capacity to perceive what others can't. And the exhaustion you're feeling is the exhaustion of a perception system running at full power with nowhere to send the signal. Pause. So the question isn't whether you're chosen, the question is whether you're using the instrument you were given or simply carrying it in a case, keeping it safe. keeping it clean, keeping it hidden from anyone who might ask you to play it, while telling yourself that the safety and the cleanliness and the hiding are the work. They're not the work. The work is transmission, allowing what was given to move through you toward the people it was designed to reach. This is where most chosen ones step back, not because the theology is too hard, but because the cost is too high. Moving from knowing to doing means you stop protecting the instrument and start playing it. And playing it means being heard. Being heard means being seen. Being seen means becoming vulnerable to exactly the rejection your generational inheritance has spent decades learning to avoid. So let me tell you what the cost actually is, the specific cost I weighed in that portobello kitchen while the mini disc sat in the drawer for over a year. They are not the work. The work is transmission. The work is letting what was given to you move through you toward the people it was always meant to reach. This is where most people who carry something step back, not because the theology is too difficult, but because the cost is too high. Moving from knowing to doing means you stop protecting the instrument and start playing it. And playing it means being heard. Being heard means being seen. Being seen means standing open to exactly the rejection your whole lineage was trained to avoid. So here's what the cost actually is, the specific cost I sat with in that portobello kitchen while the mini disc stayed in the drawer for more than a year. The cost is that you'll speak something true before anyone's given you permission to speak it, and you'll be dismissed. Not because you were wrong. Because you came from a source the gatekeepers couldn't verify. The cost is that you'll release something you know is life-giving and watch it land in rooms that aren't ready for it. The cost is that you'll be misunderstood by people who love you, people who simply can't follow where this is taking you. The cost is that you'll have to forgive them for it. More than once, for loving the version of you that existed before the transmission began. The cost is losing relationships that can't hold what you're carrying. The cost is a kind of loneliness that doesn't have a name for it, not because no one's around, but because the people around you are tuned to a frequency you've already left behind. And the cost is that you'll keep going anyway. Not because you're strong, not because you're brave, because you were made for this before you had a name, and the alternative becomes something you genuinely cannot live with. That's what shifted for me, not a breakthrough, not some dramatic turning point. Just a slow, quiet recognition that the cost of staying silent had finally outweighed the cost of speaking. The fear of being dismissed was eclipsed by the fear of reaching the end of my life with the transmission still sealed inside me. You're standing at that same threshold. The pressure in your chest, the restlessness at 3 in the morning, the feeling that something is waiting on you to move. That's the sound of a transmission pressing against its container. The container kept you safe. It kept you hidden. It protected you from a world that wasn't ready for what you carry. But somewhere along the way, the container became the very thing blocking the purpose from moving. And if you don't open it, the pressure will start to damage what's inside. This isn't a warning. It's just how things work. Water held too long goes stagnant. Light held too long becomes heat. A calling held too long becomes a weight you were never meant to carry alone. And that weight, the weight of the undelivered thing, is the real source of the exhaustion you're feeling right now. I opened the drawer in the summer of 2005. I wasn't ready. I didn't feel certified. I didn't feel safe. I plugged in that same borrowed recorder and spoke 12 sessions into existence over 3 weeks. The recordings were imperfect. The sound quality was poor. The delivery was halting in places. But the transmission left the container. And the moment it did, something shifted in me. The pressure I'd been carrying for years began to lift. Not because the work was finished, because the work had finally started. That's what happens when the transmission moves. The weight of the undelivered thing is replaced by the weight of the delivered thing, and that weight is lighter, not because it asks less of you, but because it's the weight you were built for. You were designed to bear movement. not storage, not silence. You were made to carry something across, to move what was given to you toward people who are waiting for it without knowing what they're waiting for. And the only question that matters now is whether you're going to open the drawer. You already know the specific cost that comes up in your own life when that question lands. The person whose approval you've been waiting for isn't receiving what you carry while you wait. The people who need the transmission aren't being fed while it stays sealed. And the image of the drawer, your drawer with its borrowed equipment and unspoken opening words, is lodged in you now in a way you can't unsee, because you know exactly what's inside. Which means you need to understand what builds on the other side of that opened drawer. Not a life without cost. Something far more unsettling than that. That's what I need to show you next. Pause. There's something planted inside your life that will never come out through effort. It only comes out through rest. I watched this happen in a season when everything I'd been trying to force through sheer will had collapsed at my feet, and what finally opened the door wasn't a breakthrough I manufactured. It was a surrender I'd been refusing for decades. Think about what actually happens in your body when you stop straining, not the spiritual language around it, the biology. Your nervous system shifts. The clenched architecture of your shoulders lets go. The shallow breathing that's been fueling your anxiety all day starts to deepen on its own. Your body knows how to rest. It was built for it. What it's forgotten, what you've trained it to forget, is that rest isn't the absence of activity. Rest is the presence of trust, and trust is the one thing that's been asked of you since the moment you first sensed there was something different about the way you were made. You've spent years believing the weight you carry is a sign that something's wrong. That if you were really walking in your calling, it wouldn't feel this hard. But that's not what the weight means. The weight means you've been trying to carry something that was never designed to be carried. It was designed to be transported. A bridge doesn't hold traffic forever. It holds traffic long enough for the traffic to cross. What you've been doing is standing in the middle of that bridge with the whole caravan pressing against your spine, refusing to let it move because you don't trust what's waiting on the other side. There is something planted inside your life that will never come out through effort. Only through rest. I saw this once, lived it, actually, in a season when everything I'd been forcing through sheer will had collapsed at my feet. And the thing that finally opened the door wasn't something I engineered. It was a surrender I'd been refusing for decades. Think about what happens in your body when you stop straining, not the spiritual language. The biology. Your nervous system shifts. The clenched architecture of your shoulders softens. The shallow breathing that's been feeding your anxiety all day, it begins to deepen on its own, without you asking it to. Your body knows how to rest. It was built to rest. What it's forgotten, what you've trained it to forget, is that rest isn't the absence of doing. Rest is the presence of trust. And trust is the one thing that's been asked of you since the moment you first sensed you were built for something different. You've spent years believing the weight you carry means something's wrong, that if you were truly walking in what you were called to, it wouldn't feel this heavy. But that's not what the weight means. The weight means you've been carrying something that was never meant to be carried. It was meant to move through you. A bridge doesn't hold traffic forever. It holds it long enough to let it cross. What you've been doing is standing in the middle of that bridge with an entire caravan pressing against your spine, refusing to let it pass because you don't trust what's waiting on the other side. Tonight's instruction isn't complicated. God isn't hiding anything from you. Stop holding what was meant to move through you. That's it. That's the whole assignment. Not another round of late-night searching. Not another attempt to decode the timeline. The timeline isn't yours to figure out. It belongs to the one who built time before there was a word for it. Your part is to release what you've been gripping, and trust that the release itself is how the next chapter opens. Surrender is not weakness. It's the hardest thing a person like you will ever do. And it's hard precisely because you've been trained your whole life to hold things together. You were the child who noticed when the room shifted. The one who adjusted yourself to stabilize adults who should have been stabilizing you. You learned early that someone had to do the holding and that someone was going to be you. That skill served you. It saved you in rooms where no one else was doing the job. But that same skill is now the thing standing between you and what's trying to reach you. Here's the simple physics of it. When you grip something, your hands are closed. And when your hands are closed, nothing new can enter them. This isn't metaphor, it's mechanical. The posture of holding is the posture of refusal. The anxiety or clutching, the need to know, the compulsion to map every step before it arrives. None of that is protecting you. It's blocking the very thing you've been praying for. The people, the resources, the aligned circumstances, they are already in motion. They've been in motion. What's slowing their arrival isn't a closed door somewhere above you. It's a closed hand right here in you. I watched this play out in my own life after I left Edinburgh. I had 17 years of research in a cardboard box. No job, no platform, no audience, and I spent 4 years in a rented room trying to make something happen. I applied, I pitched, I wrote proposals to people who smiled politely and never called back. None of it worked. None of it was supposed to work. Because I still believed I had to manufacture the outcome. That if I strategized hard enough, positioned myself correctly, knocked on the right door loudly enough, the next chapter would open. It didn't open. It stayed sealed. And it stayed sealed because God wasn't waiting for a better strategy. He was waiting for me to stop trying to be the architect of something he'd already designed. The moment I stopped treating my calling like a problem to solve and started receiving it like a reality already in motion, that's when things began to shift. Not because the circumstances changed overnight. Because my posture did. I stopped fighting the delay. I started trusting that the delay wasn't a denial, it was preparation. The exhaustion you feel right now isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of completion. Your body is telling you what your mind hasn't been willing to accept. The work of this season is finished. The clearing is done. What you're feeling isn't burnout. It's the quiet cool down of a soul that has made it through something most people don't survive intact. The fatigue is their integration, and if you stop reading it as weakness, you'll find something underneath it you haven't felt in a long time. Pause peace, not the kind you talk yourself into, the kind that comes when the foundation has been reinforced and the structure finally knows it's going to hold. So here is where you land tonight. Drop every analytical weapon. You are not permitted to search for solutions. The people, the resources, the aligned circumstances, they are already in motion. They've been in motion. What's slowing their arrival isn't a closed door somewhere above you. It's a closed hand right here in you. I watched this play out in my own life after I left Edinburgh. I had 17 years of research in a cardboard box. No job. No platform. No audience. And I spent 4 years in a rented room trying to make something happen. I applied. I pitched. I wrote proposals to people who smiled politely and never called back. None of it worked. None of it was supposed to work, because I still believed I had to manufacture the outcome. That if I strategized hard enough, positioned myself correctly, knocked on the right door loudly enough, the next chapter would open. It didn't open. It stayed sealed. And it stayed sealed because God wasn't waiting for a better strategy. He was waiting for me to stop trying to be the architect of something he'd already designed. The moment I stopped treating my calling like a problem to solve and started receiving it like a reality already in motion, that's when things began to shift. Not because the circumstances changed overnight. Because my posture did. I stopped fighting the delay. I started trusting that the delay wasn't a denial, it was preparation. The exhaustion you feel right now isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence of completion. Your body is telling you what your mind hasn't been willing to accept. The work of this season is finished. The clearing is done. What you're feeling isn't burnout. It's the quiet cool down of a soul that has made it through something most people don't survive intact. The fatigue is the integration, and if you stop reading it as weakness, you'll find something underneath it you haven't felt in a long time. Pause peace, not the kind you talk yourself into. The kind that comes when the foundation has been reinforced and the structure finally knows it's going to hold. So here is where you land tonight. Drop every analytical weapon. You are not permitted to search for solutions.